Welcome everybody to the Steve and Bobby Show. My name is Steve Williams, and of course Bobby Bliatu. We're missing him today again. Gosh darn it, this is like the third week. Oh, he was here last week, so. So anyway, I want to get down to some of the most important stuff that's been going on around the country. We have been aggressively reporting on the issues around the country on these protests. Chicago, Detroit, Austin, and especially in the situations in Austin, and Orlando, New York, and some of the issues that's been going on all over the country. So it's important to understand the swell of the protests, the meaning of the protests, why the protests are happening, because it's more, in my viewpoint, it's much bigger than just the fact of a BLM protest. There's a lot of things that are involved. There's a lot of groups that are involved. So I think it's important to understand kind of the dynamic of it. So, and that's why it's important to talk to activists. It's important to talk to people that are on the ground level to understand more of what's going on at that level. Because we're here in the central part of California, here in Fresno. So, I mean, we have our own local BLM movement. We have our own protests that go on here. But it seems that there's differences between the cities and their interactions with police. So let's get into it. And there's no other place, first of all, that has the world's attention more than Portland, Oregon. Portland, Oregon has seen a number of days of protest, about 70 some odd days of protest, and it's been continuous. And I think it's important to understand because Portland has a very unique issue, especially when it comes to race, with its police department and its interactions with its civilian population. So we know that there are issues there in the city of Portland. So that's why I think it's important that we go out, reach out in Portland, find out local activists that are out in Portland. And me personally, I've been actually following someone that, and some of her news feeds that has been giving us that view from that trench level. And I want to introduce everybody to a local activist out there. Her name is Cher Byrne. Let's put up Miss Byrne. How you doing, Miss Byrne?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for having me.
Excellent, excellent. So I want to because this is so important for a lot of people that are not in your city. There's a number of reasons why your city is important. The Trump administration's and its overusage of power and police force and federal law enforcement. He's been doing this with DHS and ICE agents, and there has been proof that he's actually been using hired, I don't want to say Blackwater. I don't even know what Eric Princess's new hired, I like to call them hired guns. I'm prior military, so that's what I like to call them. But you have a unique perspective because you're there. I've been following your videos for a long time. And in fact, that's one of the videos in the middle there that we're looking at. What is it in Portland specifically that the protesters want? Because there's even though these protests are going all over the country, the protests in Portland are very specific. And it seems that it's much bigger than just BLM. I think there's more involvement to that. I think a lot of that has to do with funding and just the craziness that's going on within our government now. But I think you can give us a better perspective. What is it in Portland that do you feel that the protesters there are demanding?
Well, initially it started off as, the support for the BLM movement after the death of George Floyd. And, Oregon has quite a history of, people of color being discriminated against and abuse of power by our local police force. Mm-hmm. And so like so many other cities in our country, we were demanding accountability for our local police force. And I know a lot of people, hear the chants, defund the police. And the idea behind it is not to get rid of the police or just take away their budget so they can't do their job. The idea is to, you know, better train officers and have those officers only report to violent crimes. You know, they shouldn't be dealing with homeless people or intoxicated people or people with mental health issues. You know, they're just not trained to do that properly. And, you know, throwing someone in jail isn't necessarily the correct answer for a lot of those cases. And so, you know, we'd like to, you know, lower the local law enforcement's budget and redistribute that money into different social services within our community. Also, oversight is a big thing as well. We are fighting for the qualified immunity that is provided by the police bureau's union to be disbanded, to go away, because, you know, some of these officers, they need to be held accountable for what they're doing, and the system, the way it is right now, just doesn't allow you know, good cops to do their job. And so yeah, getting rid of qualified immunity, better training, and redistributing those, you know, those funds into the community.
So I know that Portland's has an African American police chief. Is that correct? Chuck Lavelle, I think his name is.
That's
Okay.
correct.
What is his? 'Cause I always find these really unique when they put these, you know, these African American or Hispanic police chiefs into these positions. I don't know. Is Chuck Lavelle local in Portland? Is like did he grow up there, or was he an outside hire? Do you know?
I'm not sure. I believe that he used to work for the PPB, and then he went off someplace else, and then
Okay.
he was just recently became our police chief just at the very beginning of this movement. So
Okay.
he's only been in this position for a few months.
Okay, okay. Oh, very interesting. So and the reason why I asked that is because I noticed that, because by the way, much of the protest that's happening in Portland, you guys are getting success. I mean, there has been some minimal changes in the sense of, like the approval of the budget of $15 million for the police, which is something that you just mentioned, which was something they wanted within the activists, right? These are some of the proposals they wanted. And then there's a couple here. I'm going to read them off real fast. I guess you guys have it's Bill 1604, which is making it harder for arbitrators to overturn police disciplinary findings. That's actually pretty good because that's important. Establishing joint committee and transparent police and use of force. That's another big one because a lot of times what happens is these police get in trouble, or they get fired, or they do something that's against the rules within the department. They get fired, go somewhere else, and they're allowed to go somewhere else, and there's no paperwork. We saw that with the Michael Brown case in St. Louis. So in some of these demands that you guys are getting, and it seems as though there are some success there, with the federal law enforcement that's there now, because I kind of want to jump to that real quick because that's what brought the national news there. I mean, I didn't realize that Portland was still, you know, having protests there until Trump sent troops there. And, you know, I knew that there were some things going on in Portland, but the federal troop thing was very disturbing. Are the federal law enforcement, are they still there? And are they still active in the area?
To my knowledge, there are still some federal officers still at the federal courthouse in downtown Portland.
Okay.
However, since last Thursday, so a week ago, we haven't seen them. They haven't interacted with protesters.
Okay, and then the other thing is with your mayor, Ted. Is it Ted Wheeler? Your mayor?
Ted Wheeler. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Ted Wheeler. Okay, so, you know, I know that he got some national attention because they're saying that he was targeted in some of the federal law enforcement that were targeting with tear gas and stuff. Is Ted Wheeler, is he trying to work with demands within your city, or is he one of those that puts a good face, but there's no action behind it? Is there actual action behind Ted Wheeler, the mayor of Portland?
Well, that's definitely topic of contention here in Portland. Because Ted Wheeler, he's not a bad mayor. He's really good at the administrative stuff. Sustainability, making government more efficient. He's very good at the administrative side of things. However, not only during this movement, but during protests against ICE detention facilities over the last couple of years, he's proven that when it comes to making the tough decisions, he doesn't like to take a hard stance on anything. And what we've seen here with the BLM movement is, since the protests, I've recently learned that Ted Wheeler is also the police commissioner. And so he definitely has, the authority to make changes. And it seems like a lot of it is talk. He doesn't really want to take sides. And because of the growing, aggravation over his responses, some of the BLM organizations invited him to come out to the protest and speak. And it was then that he was tear gassed with the rest of protesters. I don't believe that he was targeted. I'm sure they knew he was out there in the crowd, but he was standing within a few feet of the fence, along with a few thousand other people, and they were all treated the same.
Okay. So how about your Governor Kate Brown? So she's another unique individual. I guess the same question would go for her, because I know what she's saying on the national syndicated television. I've seen her on CNN. I've seen her on MSNBC. I know what she's saying, but what is she doing?
Like all politicians, she's very careful about what she says. From what I've seen, it seems that she's been very vocal, especially against the federal occupation of Portland. I know that she's met with Mr. Wolf, who visited here with the feds, and they've been discussing ways to stop the violence. And but as for like the Portland PD and that unrest it was going on long before the feds, and is still going on now that the feds aren't there on the ground in the picture. I haven't seen her really step up and condemn those actions
Right.
as much as I think we'd like her to.
Because I was gonna say, I know that Portland is kind of a unique city because it's politically it's a very progressive, liberal city, but it has its issues. It has its racial issues there. I've had a couple of friends actually in the service. And by the way, I wanna bring this up because there's a lot of misrepresentation in the sense of who's being out there and who's being activists and protests that are out there. Ms. Byrne, you're actually a veteran, right? You've served in the military.
I am. Yeah, I was a U.S. Army.
U.S. Army. So I know a lot of people, being in the service, being a veteran, a lot of veterans tend to lean a little right. So it's always good to see a fellow veteran. That's we're very, in the sense, well, we're not so much rare, but we're out there. Evidently, you're proof to that. But what I was going to, I think the overall question that I want to ask you, after all, we have 70 some days of protests going out there. We see some incremental changes that are happening within the police departments and some things that your mayor is trying to do to make things work there. what are the people saying? As in some of the activists, I know you. It's been since Friday. I think you've been out there. Is that right? So
Correct.
when you went out there the very last day, what were the people saying? I mean, I know because I watch your feeds often, and I've seen hours of them where I've sat there and looked and watched the whole thing. But what are the people in Portland and a lot of the activists? Are they, do they think that there's enough change happening, or is it not moving quick enough for them, or are some of these demands that the city and the police departments are doing, are changes, are actually happening? Is that enough for them?
So overall, I think that the majority of protesters are unhappy with what has been done so far. You mentioned that the police budget was reduced by 15 million, which sounds like a lot, but when you look at their entire budget, it was kind of a drop in the hat. Um, you know, Luckily, Commissioner Hardesty here in Portland, she has been a extremely strong, consistent voice
Mm-hmm.
for civil rights long before this movement came to Portland, and and I know that she's working hard to get things done, but um, it definitely feels slower than it should be. It feels like um, you know the condemning what the PPB have been doing before the feds arrived
Mm-hmm.
um, is something that we don't feel like is getting enough attention.
Yeah.
They definitely stepped up and had a strong arm when the feds came and we were in the national spotlight. But now that that's over, the PPB are still going back to tear gassing people in neighborhoods
Mm.
and not just protecting their building, but throwing CS gas over a block away, which is now preventing peaceful protesters who are trying to keep a safe distance, not giving them that option of of getting out of harm's way. And um, and I know that there's a going to be a vote in November for a oversight committee. And however, when you look into the details of that oversight committee kind of seems like it's just an additional step on top of what's already in place. It's not really the reform that we're looking for. So yeah, I definitely believe that until we see the police union, take away unqualified immunity and see some real reform, I think these protests are going to keep happening.
If there is one thing that you want the nation to think about these protests in Portland, if there's one thing you, Cher Byrne, wants everybody to know, a misrepresentation of Portland, Portland's in the spotlight. So whatever news channel you're putting on, that's the perspective you're going to get. You understand what I'm saying? But
Mm-hmm.
what does Cher Byrne, what does she want to tell people out in the world? Hey, this is what's being misrepresented. Is there something that you want to express that maybe we on the outside are not seeing, that's being misrepresented on the outside?
Definitely, because I watch the news as well,
Mm.
and it's really difficult to be out there and see everything firsthand, and then read about it the next day and see how skewed it is. Um, I have a lot of people from all over the country and even other countries reach out to me privately asking me, is this true? Is that true? And it's always part of the truth. So, when either the PPB or the feds make a report and they make a statement, they're always using um, very biased language, calling us violent and talking about projectiles being thrown and injuring officers when it might have been just a water bottle. Um, uh, and the news always just focuses on the aggression. You know, all they see are these people clad in black wearing, you know, hockey gear and face masks and attacking, you know, the federal building. But what you're not seeing is the thousands of people that are standing behind them, or the thousands of people that were there completely um, peaceful up until the moment officers started engaging. And you know, it's really the officers, both local law enforcement and feds, that were instigating every one of these, every one of these nights when they come out and deploy munitions. I'm not seeing anything other than people throwing water bottles, um, and you know, other things that, you know, I guess really it just they're making us look a lot worse than we are,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not recognizing everything else that is going on. Um, and so I just want to remind people that there are people out there of all nationalities, colors, religions, age, sex, orientation. Um, and so, you know, when you read about these reports, you know, you can't be thinking of them as all rioters or all, you know, violent protesters. There are a few agitators, definitely, but the majority of the group condemns that and tries their hardest to stop that from happening, because it does detract from the movement.
So I think that's why it's so important to talk to locals in the area. I know the news tries to do that in their own little way, but that's why it's important to talk to people like you. That is why some of the stuff that you were doing, especially with your live feeds, was instrumental for people like me who, you know, our only form we had was looking through the media glass. We weren't, you know, we weren't able to look at what people in Portland were saying. That's why doing what you were doing was so important. And of course, we appreciate that. I know I do. So, Cher, I really appreciate you coming on today, Ms. Byrne, and you know, letting us know what's going on up in the trenches there, because it's important. It's important to know what's going on, and I really, really enjoyed our conversation that we had today. You know, I actually wouldn't mind having you back at some point, maybe later on in the future. Maybe you can tell us what's going on, hey, a year after, 6 months after, and you can tell us some, you know, some of these changes. Are these changes being implemented, and are they working?
I would love to.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ms. Byrne. I appreciate you for coming on to the Steve and Bobby Show. Um, like I say, everybody out there, make sure that if you're watching anything that's important to you in the local level, on the outside level, make sure that the individuals that you're listening to, the people that you're talking to, are people like Cher Byrne, who is actually on the ground, and you're not getting any biased information. You are getting it straight from the ground. That's why these things are important. Anyway, I appreciate everybody for watching the Steve and Bobby Show. Again, my name is Steve Williams. Miss Byrne, there you are again. I appreciate. We'll talk to everybody on the other side. Thank you very much.